South Africa-Nigeria Business Forum. Well, to get a wrap from the forum, we're now joined by our business reporter, Arabile Gumede. Arabile, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We caught the end of this forum, but a lot has been happening there since this morning. Do you want to take us through some of the highlights of what was said and discussed during this business forum?
Yeah, good afternoon, Peter. Well, thank you so much for the time. Of course, look, it has been a discussion really of collaborative effort, right? It has been one where I think the lying or the perhaps embers of fire that perhaps sat in the bellies of both nations was certainly being looked at. No longer was the fight now for who becomes number one on the continent, but certainly how Africa can come out tops in this relationship. Perhaps building what has been a partnership that has been absolutely critical and necessary for the upliftment of the entire African continent. That certainly culminated then in the messages being brought forward here as well then by President Cyril Ramaphosa and then the delegate that obviously represented then President Buhari from Nigeria. They're coming through as the Trade and Industry Minister from Nigeria. So the messages were certainly clear, and if one was to quote certainly what has been the clear message from President Cyril Ramaphosa was turning contacts into contracts. No longer is it just about getting the words out, but it's time now to perhaps get some action into this portrayal and this hard work as well. So indeed, as we end the conference, it certainly does mean that the business forum itself, which is now set to meet at least twice a year, is going to certainly have to put its best foot forward. And this seems to be the correct and the best starting place, as of course now we head into the investment conference, which we expect to happen in November as well.
Arabile, do you get a sense that there's a bit more optimism? There was almost an admission that things could have been better over the years, but perhaps this relationship was a little neglected, and that a reset button needs to be pressed so that things can be accelerated and, as you said, you know, sort of put air to the embers.
Look, if there's ever a perfect time to perhaps kickstart both economies, now is that time. If ever there was a time to be able to kickstart the relations between the two countries, now is certainly that time. In an era where the top two nations in the world are fighting with regards to their trade dispute, the top two nations in Africa are certainly saying it's not going to be the same case for them. They're going to build that relationship. It seems that the political will is there. It seems that the drive to grow and build the businesses is certainly there. The program director was the Trade and Industry Minister, Ibrahim Patel, and he noted 7 trillion rand worth of goods exchanged hands between Africa and the rest of the world. Perhaps a figure that the continent itself should be tapping into in order to grow what is a continent that is perhaps just awaiting a whole lot of investment. Yes, we need the drive. Yes, we need the ability to grow the continent, but how do we do so if we do not invest in self? How then do we ensure that we move away from just consuming the goods we don't produce to perhaps producing the goods that we consume and indeed offer to others? Indeed, it does seem that a lot more of this partnership is perhaps being wanted to be taken on by quite a few participants here at the forum.
All right, a lot still needs to be done, and one of them that keeps coming up is the ease of doing business. And the President even noted that one big issue is the issue of visas, and we know that that's been a challenge, and I dare say for a lot of Nigerians trying to come into South Africa, and also for South Africans trying to get into Nigeria, the length of time and sometimes just not getting the visas doesn't help.
I certainly think that that will be one of the biggest measures of whether there's been successful conversations between the two nations and whether this relationship is actually taken forward, whether the visas indeed will be settled, whether there will be an easier path between the two big nations, which certainly opens up the most part of Southern Africa and the highest part, of course, of West Africa as well. Of course, with East Africa, that becomes another hub as well. If those three corridors are certainly opened up, it tells you the story of how Africa is beginning to open up. It means that the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement doesn't just become a contract. It doesn't just become hearsay. It doesn't just become an acronym. It now becomes something we actually are putting into action. It becomes then a quantifiable progression mark for the rest of the continent. So indeed, that visa situation, as the president said, President Cyril Ramaphosa noted it and said that he will be meeting with Home Affairs tomorrow. The progress on that, I suppose, is one that we need to hold him accountable for. And certainly I can tell you now that Nigerians will certainly be doing so, and I think so too do we as a business here in South Africa and as citizens of the country as well need to hold him accountable for in order to build this continent a whole lot more.
All right, and I guess, we've talked again also about this continent-wide free trade agreement, and that the president said that all countries should benefit from this. But it's been a bit sluggish in terms of some of these bigger countries actually ratifying this agreement. I think Nigeria is one of them.
Yeah, indeed. So the signing of that was done quite late, wasn't it? In the end, ultimately there with the likes of Nigeria, it was ultimately ratified by most African countries as well. What does it mean, however? Does that mean that we've gotten the signatures and now the action needs to be put in place? That is what is critical right now, Peter. It certainly does mean that we need to find a way to perhaps enhance the structures, enhance exactly how we're going to do this trade negotiation, considering that, one, you have multiple currencies, multiple demographics, you have multiple policies that are certainly in place, ways of doing things, traditions, old practices which certainly need to either be put to bed or really transformed into a way that will aid and really immeasurably deliver the progress that Africa needs. The growth structures in this continent are certainly suffering at this present moment, and there's only one way to fix that, and that is by collaborative effort that is put into direct action, Peter. And clearly the message here has been to certainly do that. Yes, they didn't shy away from the obvious factors of the violence against foreign internationals, and that needed to be put to bed and done so properly. We certainly hope it's not a matter that creeps up again in future, as it does then taint not only the relationship but certainly the business elements between the two countries.
Arabile, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much indeed. No doubt we'll chat to you again a little bit later on the channel. That's Arabile Gumede, our business anchor and reporter, reporting from the South Africa-Nigeria Business Forum, which looks like is wrapped up for the day.